Okay, everyone, welcome to the Mind Body Energy Project. Hello, Tiffany.
Hello, Yolanda. How
How are
are
you?
you?
Ooh, I'm doing well. You know, I'm doing well.
Good,
How are
good,
you, Miss Out of Town?
good. I'm out of town. I'm in South Carolina right now. I
Look at that.
surprised my best friend from college for her 40th birthday. It was great.
That is so
There was
sweet of you.
there was screaming and crying. It was awesome. Me and her husband pulled it off.
That is so stinking cute of you. I would love to do something like that for someone one day. I'm just
You
horrible
can
at
do it for me. I love surprises.
planning. Okay, well, when is 40 for you? Next year?
Oh, it's in like 10 years. And no, it's not next year.
Okay. Well, honey, I don't know. Listen, everybody I know now is either like just hitting it or in the vicinity or just over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm coming up on 42. So I don't know. I just like to drag
You don't
everyone
look a
along
day
with.
over 22.
Thank you, babe. Thanks. So I feel like 5. No. Um, no, so glad to have you here though. I mean, like, look at your commitment
Yeah.
to the project.
That's right, everybody. You hear that? We are committed to this. We're
We are
creating this
so
community
committed
for
to
you.
this.
We really are. We really are.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about what we're talking about today because I think I don't even think, even in my own podcasting years, I don't think I've ever talked about what we're going to talk about. So we wanted to share this with you because it is the day after a holiday. And first, we both just want to acknowledge, we know that a lot of people do not celebrate or acknowledge Thanksgiving because of its origins, but we do also know that there are plenty of people who are spending time with family and friends, and we're respecting both sides of the fence. So
Yeah, we're
regardless
cool
of,
with all of it.
yeah, no matter what you did or where you are and how you stand, we think this topic will benefit you no matter what. So we're going to talk about rebalancing after, having interactions like group interactions, and even sometimes the expectation that you should be socializing when you really just want to be alone, or
That's a
perhaps
good one.
are away from family like me. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
that's a good one.
well, I wanted to start with you, honey, just asking just in a general sense before we get into like specifics. How do you tend to do in those type of gatherings, whether it's holiday or how do you, how does it hit you?
um, oh, it hits me hard. And for the longest time, I didn't really understand it. And we did our podcast on empaths, and you can go back in the archives and listen to that, to the history of it. But it's funny. I'm considered an extroverted introvert. Even my astrology teachers have told me that too, based on my sign or my chart. And I'm very introverted, and I can go really deep into myself. But I am energized by other people, so I come across as an extrovert. And I get really jazzed up with people, but because I get so jazzed up, sometimes I get too jazzed up, and it's very overwhelming. And if I don't ground myself before, if I'm not preparing myself for knowing that I'm going into that kind of environment, if I do it mindlessly, I get very, very drained and overwhelmed. And then I retreat. And sometimes just even because of we log in the memory and the knowledge of that, our body keeps the score of things. And sometimes, if there's an upcoming event that I know I've been to something similar, or there's been people there that I know are a little bit stronger energetically than others, I will retreat and not want to go out. And if I'm not mindful about paying attention to the reasons why, I just sort of react the way I have in past situations of being in overwhelming situations like that.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of I have what do you call it? I have that response the same from going to the airport,
Oh
because every time I go to the airport, I'm the one that's like pulled aside, extra padding, blah, blah, blah. So just the thought of travel makes me anxious. And I just, even before I even get there. So
Yeah.
one of the things, both of our situations reminds me of something we shared on another podcast, was about the importance of preparing ourselves. It may have been the empath episode, but preparing ourselves energetically before going into situations that we know may be more challenging. And I do have to be when I'm going to any type of crowd, whether a dinner or like a concert or anything where there's the grocery store, okay? Anything where there's going to be a lot of people in a concentrated space, I do really have to take the time to prepare myself, reframe my point of view, all of these things, just so that I'm not going into it like in my old stories.
I'm glad that you brought up, one, old stories. We should come back to that. I'm going to write it down. But airplanes, because obviously I flew across the country to get here, and my friend was asking me how the flight was, and I had to take 2 flights. One of the flights, there was really, really bad turbulence. And I too oftentimes kind of dread the traveling part of traveling, because being in a contained space in an airplane with large numbers of people, and then especially when there's turbulence, I'm not afraid of turbulence. I have an understanding of how it works, and also a surrender of like, I can't do anything about it, so we might as well just enjoy it, kind of. I like when my stomach kind of drops. But meanwhile, like, there's people that are freaking out. And I mean, this plane ride, people were like holding the backs of chairs and being like gasping. And I'm just like, I understand, I'm okay with it. But then there's a certain degree where there's so much of that energy around you that it can't help but it start to permeate your field, and then you start feeling it. So airplanes, places that are small, contained, and you're in them for a long amount of time. And again, as much as you prepare for something, I think there's still this degree of like adaptation, that our field will start to adapt to the surroundings around us. And even though like you're mindful and you're preparing yourself for this, there's still aspects of it are going to creep in, and it can be very overwhelming.
I'm glad you said that too, because I think that highlights the importance of the consistency of our practice. Because what you do start to recognize is the more you show up in managing your own energetic field daily, even if nothing is coming up for you, even if you're not going to travel, even if you're not going to a party or anything, you just do it daily as part of your practice. What you find is your energetic field does become stronger. That's the only way I can describe it. And you start to recognize when you're being affected by external things much quicker, and you're able to shift it much faster. So there is a lot of benefit to, practicing just your own daily maintenance of balancing and rebalancing, because it helps when in those situations where you really need it, like ASAP.
And that links in with what you said about old stories. The more that we practice something, the more that we can cut away what those old stories are, so that they're not the overwhelming theme of what our lives are. And that takes practice, one, to chip away that old story to create a new one. But those are the things that are going to creep back in if we're not mindful of them and practicing every day to move forward, of like training our brain to release that old story and move into the new one.
Totally. No, that makes so much sense. And one of the things too, I just want to point out for everyone before we go into some of the things that Tiffany and I thought we would talk about today, is this is kind of like predictive. We're imagining what it is typically like after going to gatherings or holidays, and like how we feel on the other side of that. And the reason I'm saying predictive is because we're pre-recording this. So we're just thinking of the different scenarios of what we all experience at any given time. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about is it is really common when we have these types of gatherings, especially when, maybe family gatherings, that we come into situations that maybe have triggered us. It may have been, uncomfortable. Maybe if there are family members that just really push your buttons, or, any type of upset that possibly could have happened, and how we deal with that on the other side. So let's start with you. Like, have you ever had, well, you have siblings and everything, so I imagine it must happen. Yeah. But what will you share, or can you share about those type of experiences and how you work through them, either before versus how you do it now with the tools that you have?
Well, I've done both. I've worked with it before, and then I've gotten over so I live across the country from my family. So when I go over there, having moved across the country for over a decade now, I have had the opportunity to experience myself and like how I can want to condition myself and behave versus staying within that pattern of my family. And I think that happens to a lot of us. We stay within a community or an environment and we're trying to find ourselves within that environment. I had the opportunity to separate from it to find me. So now I plug myself back into that, and it doesn't fit. It's different. So I've noticed that every time I go back, I'm different. I don't function the way that they do, and they don't understand how I do function because it's unfamiliar to them. And that's all good and fine. But I have prepared myself every time I go home to know that. But even then plugging myself in, there's some other new twists I get, which I get to take back with me and analyze and try to repair from and integrate it into, my knowns and create a new tool for the toolbox. So I get the opportunity all the time to get a new tool to put in the toolbox, new experiences. And it's challenging, to be quite honest. It really is challenging, but I wouldn't trade it, because what I've been able to discover in myself and in my new experiences, having separated from that, while some of it going back and learning what I learned is very daunting, I do, and sometimes a little bit traumatic, if I'm being quite honest. I come back with some traumatic incidences. The value and the jewel in it is to bring it back and understand it. I get to look at why I function the way that I did in a circumstance, why they function the way they did. And it broadens my view and my understanding of not only just my family or friends, but just kind of humans in general. And then it gives me a better understanding of how to navigate the world so that I'm not afflicted or affected by things that are unseen or unknown to me. I'm better at adaptability to moving through that.
Yeah. I mean, you said so much that like we're triggering like boom, 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 all these light bulbs. But one of the first things that you said that really stood out to me is the patterns that we have in different.
Dog trying to sew. Hi.
Hey, dog. Different patterns that we have in communities, and like how our families are one of the main ones, because we do assume different roles within our families. And we tend to stay in those roles until, we decide to change, but especially when we do this work, just like you said, it's interesting that we notice we start showing up differently in response to our family dynamic, which then can go either way. Like sometimes it's annoying to people because they're like, what are you doing? Like, who are you being? So one of the things when you said that, it reminded me of how important it is for us to remember that self-management again, and how like we are always in that choice of how am I going to respond? Am I going to put into practice these tools and these things that I have become aware of? Or am I going to be pulled back into my old patterns and respond the way that I used to? And just acknowledging that we always have that choice. But another thing that you said, and how you like take the stuff back home and analyze it, it reminded me of the book that I'm reading right now, the Paul Selig book that I just got a little while ago. There was a part in there where he was talking about, or his guides were talking about, how all of our situations in life, which we've covered this before, but all of them are opportunities to learn. So it's like even our family, who can be the most triggering to us, and even these situations that seem so challenging and frustrating, they really give us this beautiful opportunity to be in our choice, to shift our perspective, to function in a higher way. I mean, we have so many opportunities to also look at our own responsiveness within those. So yeah, it's really cool that you said that. Another thing is, because I have 2 half brothers, but I grew up my mother's only child. So I grew up pretty much an only child. So I didn't really have, the dynamic that a lot of people have of like a bigger family. It was just me and my mom. But my family, my extended family, like my family's huge. And so, like I said, I'm 3,000 miles away, but when I go home, it is very, it's interesting because there is so much energy and there is so much going on and so many personalities, but I love it. And typically my empathic self, like I would want to go on a hole, but I think because I'm away from my family so much, when I do get to be with them, it's like I just want to take it all in. Like I just want to, but I am exhausted on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I want to come back to that you said, that when we come back and people get triggered or triggered by that, but part of it too is that when you're an individual that changes and you get plugged back into that scenario that maybe hasn't shifted as much, we're mirrors. So we mirror to them that we're now challenging the way that they were or are, because they see a change in you and it triggers in them that they're not making a change and maybe they should, or they just don't know how to deal with that.
It takes them out of their pattern, right? Because they're used to that pattern, that automatic, the way you guys engage. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And when you're saying a choice to respond, they don't necessarily really have the choice to respond because they're behaving in a pattern. So they're just responding as they normally would, as they understand it. And that might trigger us to want to respond to how we would respond to their normal behaviors. But like, again, you have the choice to respond differently, but you would have to recognize that you're challenging them and that's why they're being triggered.
And I think to your point too, what's interesting is, and it really depends on the person, sometimes just like what you're saying, like if you respond differently, it may kind of be jarring to them where they do have to kind of consider like, wait, I'm the only one yelling right now, or I'm the only one, you know what I mean? Which some people that infuriates them, and some people it does kind of bring them down, but either way, it will bring them into consideration of the part they played. Now they may not,
sometimes what will happen is it triggers, it throws fuel on the fire. Mm-hmm. You would hope that they would step back and consider it, but it might not necessarily do that too. I think what we're doing, our predictive work right now is letting you know that situations you might come across with a bunch of people gathering in one place, likely where there's alcohol involved. So things could escalate.
Totally. So before we go on to our next scenario of possibility, let's just give maybe one tip of how do you deal with that though? Like if you did have an exchange that was challenging, what do you do on the other side? Now it's the day after. What do you do?
I say go for a walk. Go for a walk and meditate. We just finished our series on meditation, and that's the best way to really center yourself and allow the things that are not necessary to fall away to get back to what's important.
Yeah. My tip for it is really be in consideration too of how the situation was left. Were there things that were left unsaid? Does it feel unresolved? And is that bothering you? And do you feel in any way that you may need to reach back out and make amends or share what was on your heart? Or, because sometimes when we're in those conflicts or difficult situations, we just bottle it up and then we walk away and we're like, oh, what I should have said and what I should have done. But then sometimes our ego gets in the way and we don't want to be the one that makes the call. Really consider where you're at in your point of view. And if you feel like there's a next step that you can take to help rebalance the situation.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because as you were saying it was yelling back here, the ego. Our ego mind is the one that wants to retaliate and make things even. Yep. But really, what's going to make something even? More chaos. So taking into consideration, how do I rebalance the situation versus trying to find a one-sided perceived justice?
That makes me think of, I don't know if I shared this before or not, but one of the things that helped me with this when I first started my practice of self-observation and being in my choice, when I was triggered and I recognized that my ego wanted to defend or wanted to be the one on top or wanted to win or whatever it was, I had to really check myself and ask and be honest, what's my motivation? What's my motivation behind this response or this reaction that I want to have? Am I trying to hurt the person? Am I trying to one-up them? What is my actual motivation? And if it was something that wasn't in a space of love and it was totally my ego, well, then I had to make that choice. Is it worth it? Like, what are you trying to prove? You know? So yeah, I mean,
that is so good. I'm glad that you bring that up because as a Scorpio, I have to do that a lot.
Oh, I bet.
And I will tell you that I have spent a lot of time analyzing what my motivation is. And I've had to put that stinger away several times because I know once that thing comes out and it does what it does, it's done. And so, and I know that. So I know that about myself, and I know that I need to sit down and really figure out, like, you know, I would say like words can be our greatest weapon, and I'm good with it. But the destruction that it can bring isn't worth it. So I really have to sit and understand what's my motivation, what's driving my motivation, and is it something that is worthwhile putting out there?
We really got to get off this topic, but what you just said is also, I think, a good way that we can look at it is thinking like, are my words or my response, are they going to harm or are they going to support? And I think even if we ask ourselves that too, that can even like help us check ourselves, like, you know, and I think we talked about the power of words before too. We've talked about everything. Go back, archives. Okay. So our next potential situation you may have had is the staying in touch. So something that happens a lot of times when we have these kind of gatherings, we end up reconnecting or seeing people that we haven't seen in a while, even like Tiffany right now is with her friend. And we always have, you know, stay in touch. Yeah, I'm going to contact you. Oh, yeah. Ooh, you know, but we don't always necessarily do the best job at that. So I wanted to ask you about that too. Like with your friends and family, do you ever sit and think like, oh, I need to do a better job of truly keeping in touch, maintaining and working on those relationships? Or are you someone that's just like, oh, well, I'm thinking about them, so that's enough? And is it enough? Like if people don't know that you're thinking of them, like how much are you really nurturing that relationship? So how has that shown up for you, and how well do you do with actually keeping in touch and maintaining?
I'm somewhere in the middle, and by in the middle, I don't mean like I'm a little bit of both. I mean, I'm one or the other, and it balances itself out that way. But what I do know about myself is that once I have a relationship with somebody, they're kind of always there, unless something has dramatically shifted it and it's not. So I'm one of those people where I don't have to talk to somebody for a long time, but when I see them, it's like no time has passed at all.
Yes.
And I come into those situations kind of knowing that, and that's just kind of how I always feel. Yeah. Some people that I interact with like that they're always surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, it feels like no time's ever passed. And I'm like, yeah, I know, duh. Like, what did you expect? You know? But also I do think about people a lot, and every once in a while, like I'll just send a text, like I'm thinking about you, you know, and then that triggers the little, let's get together thing. What I do know about it though, is it's interesting because I think this is a really important piece of the topic, because we sometimes forget our connection to people.
Yep.
And we forget what that's like when we're not in their presence. And then like sometimes we might think that we lose it if we don't hear from them or we're not connecting with them. We think that it no longer exists. And so then we kind of, in our subconscious somewhere, write it off, you know, rather than thinking like, oh, this person is in my life. They do care about me. I haven't heard from them in a while, but let me reach out and see it as another line of support, you know? And I think we tend to forget that sometimes, and it leads to a little bit of isolation.
Yes. No, that's such a good one. So 3 things that you triggered for me when you were sharing that is, one, the excitement. You know how when you haven't seen someone in so long and you're so excited to see each other, and there's just like this, it feels so good. If you like step back and think about how good it feels, that someone is so happy to see you, and what it feels like to be seen, and how excited you are to see someone else. And I point that out just to highlight the impact that we have on each other. You know what I mean? And sometimes when we have these connections and reconnect, and we're on this high, and then we walk away from the gathering or the event, and then we're like back into our regular mode. But just like to your point, I think the more we maintain and put effort in sustaining our connections and relationships, I think it feeds into us in ways that go beyond anything we may really think about consciously. But
Yeah.
it also made me think of how when you get a text from somebody that maybe you haven't seen in a while, or if you did say, oh, let's keep in touch, and then they really do reach out to you, how good it can feel, again, to have that acknowledgement or knowing, even like unsaid, that it meant enough to them or you were on their mind. And you never know how you may shift someone's day. That's one of the things too. I mean,
Totally.
like you may just think like, oh, I'm thinking about Betty. Let me just say hi to her. She could have been having a
Yeah.
horrible day. And just that acknowledgement that she was on your mind, we don't think about how much we really do impact each other. And I mean, it's the little things, right? But I think one of the biggest things in that is being seen and recognizing the importance of our connections. And again, those relationships and how they feed us, like they do really
Yeah.
nurture us. And we may notice a shift in ourselves. Maybe this is like a challenge. Start making an effort to just do like Tiffany did, like what you said, like a quick hello, or hey, just thinking about you. And notice that that does make a difference in your overall life.
Yeah, I want to point something out that I think is crucial. One, I do have a friend that does that. Like she just will randomly just be like, I'm thinking about you. And like, that's the end of our conversation. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. I love you. I miss you. And like, that's it. That's good enough. And we know that we'll connect at some point and grab dinner or whatever. However, I have seen more often than that situation, what happens is because of the way our technology is now with communicating and like texting. I have several friends I can think of. And if you're listening and you know that this is you, I have several others than just you. So you all gave me the opportunity to point this out. And I'm not saying I'm not a victim of it too, but we get a text message or we see that we missed their phone call and we're like, well, I have too much that I want to talk to them about. So they put it off for days and you don't hear from them for days, like a text message or a phone call.
Yeah.
And when you finally do, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I wanted to get back to you, but I had all this to do. So I didn't acknowledge it at that point in time, but days go by, and I think this is kind of a detriment of our instant gratification of communication, is that we're actually like making it worse by not doing that because we know that, all this other stuff. So, and if we kept in more touch and more in contact, then we wouldn't have to have these long periods of whatever, but that may be the relationship. The relationship may be that you spend an hour or two with this person if you contact them. But again, just drawing attention to the fact where it's like, I'm thinking about you. I don't have time to do this. Let's do it at some point. It keeps that connection intact. And I think we're losing that in our society.
Oh, we're totally losing it in our society. And one of the things that you remind me of with that as well is, and I'm guilty of it. Sometimes I'll get text messages and things throughout the day and I can't look at them right away. And then I forget to, and then by the time I do, but when I'm on the other end of that, like say if I texted you and you didn't respond for 24 hours, I go automatically into worry. And I'm like, oh my God, is Tiffany okay?
Yeah.
Like, I hope she's okay. And you just forgot to respond. So it's interesting too with technology, how because we are used to instant gratification, how we do have a tendency of going into immediate worry and making up stories when we don't get immediate responses. Whereas before, if you called someone and their answer machine came on, you didn't have that panic because you knew there was the potential that they didn't hear your message for a long time. So yeah, that's really interesting too. So two things. So one thing you reminded me of as well is I have just a couple of people, I can really like one hand, maybe like three fingers, who take the time to send handwritten cards and notes. Like how nice is that? Like one, who sends mail anymore? But the fact that some people take the time to like write out something, go put it in the mail. There is nothing better than getting like a card or a note that is handwritten.
It is the best.
Yeah. And but in relation to like this rebalancing after the fact, I think it's also a nice way of extending that energy of gratitude to whoever may have hosted or maybe whoever was there. Like maybe you could send a letter, say thank you. Remember people used to do that. People used to be so polite, like thank you card.
I know.
Oh, it's like a dying tradition.
It is. We have to bring it back.
Yeah. So what is some tip that you may have for like, how can we do better with actually nurturing our connections beyond the scheduled gatherings?
I think handwritten notes are wonderful.
Yeah.
I really like that. But being better at nurturing connections. I don't know. I think just staying connected, like letting somebody know that you're thinking about them.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe scheduling in. I mean, life is really busy. Being mindful of how do I schedule this in to make sure that I'm keeping that connection, and or at least like that person knows that their connection is important to me.
I think for me, it is as simple as being mindful enough that when someone pops in mind, to send the message right away. I mean, we have these devices.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like right here. I can text you at any time, just a quick, like, hey, just thinking of you, like you said. But oftentimes what I find is I will think of a person and then I'll say like, oh, I'll text them later. And then I totally forget I never did it. So I am going to practice more of the immediate, like when I think of you, actually acknowledging that in the moment so that it's not just like a fleeting thought.
You just reminded me I owe somebody a text. I formulated the text in my mind and I didn't resent it. So now I need to text her.
Yeah.
Write it down so I don't forget.
Okay. So our next possibility of what you may have experienced and may experience anytime is the expectations that we have about being social during the holidays. So it could be twofold. Sometimes people just don't want to be social. Like you might not want to go if you received invitations for whatever reason. I know I have a friend who doesn't like to go to things because she's single and everyone is coupled up. And so she doesn't like to go for that reason. Or maybe just like me, maybe you're away from your family and it's not convenient. There are some times where like I would have turned down invitations because I missed my family and I didn't really want to be around other people and their families. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, I'll just stay in my own little bubble. But honestly, it was always odd to me when I would choose to just be in my own space. I actually like the holidays where I don't have anything planned and I can just have a day of solitude because we rarely have that. And my personality, I really love it. But what's interesting is a lot of people, my friends, some of them would like almost like pity me in a way, like, oh, honey, are you okay? Like your family's not here. Like what, and it's like, no, I'm good. Yeah. But sometimes people don't, whatever. So anyway, have you ever had a situation, whether it was a holiday or just a party, a gathering, anything, where you either maybe weren't invited or opted out? And what was that like for you?
Yeah. I've spent, not last year, but several New Year's Eve before that, I've spent by myself and purposefully. I came to realize that the holiday kind of never really went well. So, and there were great expectations with it and they never lived up to it. So I was just kind of like, you know what? Let me just take the time by myself. And like the first year that I did it, I made myself a nice dinner. I watched a movie. I meditated for an hour. I like did this whole like chart of like looking at the past year and what I wanted the next year to look like. And I went to bed at like 9 p.m. And then I woke up the next day on New Year's Day and I went for a bike ride and I went to the beach and it was glorious. And the other thing too that
Oh, you're freezing a little bit. It's like, take a breather. Can you hear me, honey? Can you hear me? You're like really, it's really pausing. Oh, you can't even hear me.
Oh no, sorry.
Okay, now
I can hear you. Yeah.
I think I can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Okay, now I can hear you. You're frozen on the screen in an interesting gesture, but now I can hear you. So what did you say? Did we lose you? Well, I will share something that came up from something that you said and see if you actually come back. One of the things that you reminded me of was the old patterns and sometimes how we change and evolve. New Year's specifically, that's what you reminded me of. So when I was younger, like in my 20s, New Year's was so much fun to go out and party with everyone and do all of that type of thing. But then as I got older, I'd say even into my 30s, I just didn't want to do it anymore. Like I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to deal with the chaos and all of the stuff that came with that particular celebration. So I completely understand. But what I was going to say is it's important for us to honor when we are different. Like as we change, like maybe we don't want to show up in that way anymore. Maybe we don't want to, let's see. We have Tiffany gone off of video for those of you who may be watching. Oh, she's coming back. So yeah, I mean, like really honoring and understanding that sometimes your old way of celebrating or your old way of showing up may change. And it doesn't mean anything's wrong, but allowing yourself to live into or move into your new desire of how to show up or not.
Did you just carry all of that on while I was in and out of this Zoom meeting?
Yeah, when you completely froze, honey, I was like, you know what, I'll just go with the whole New Year's thing because you reminded me of something. So
this is great.
Now that
it's
you're
great.
back.
I love that we like landed right where we left off.
Yes.
I thought it was over.
Yeah, no. So go ahead, babe. Share with us. What were you saying?
But yeah, the same idea. People were like, oh, that's so sad. You're spending New Year's together. I'm like, are you kidding me? No. And then I wake up on New Year's Day and go to the beach, ride my bike to the beach, and it's so quiet. Like everybody's like hungover. It's the morning. Like I saw somebody's like shoe in the middle of the street, and like some girl was clearly in her outfit from the night before, and they feel like shit. And I'm on my way to a bike ride being like feeling so rejuvenated, and I can enjoy the quiet morning.
Yeah.
And I mean, it feels so redemptive.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I enjoy about it too. Like sometimes being in that space of solitude, whether it was if I wasn't invited to something or I chose to be by myself, it was really having that space to just do me. Like I could be on the couch in my pajamas all day, or I could actually get things done that I normally didn't have time for. It's usually nice because nobody's outside, like everybody's inside doing whatever they're doing. So, I enjoy somewhat having solitude in the holidays, but
there's also something about doing like the non-conventional holiday celebrating, because I do find it exhausting sometimes. So to do the opposite of what is considered what we're supposed to do around those times.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
That feels rejuvenating for me sometimes.
No, totally. And one of the things too, for people who live away from their families, like Tiffany and I do, one of the things that I haven't done in a few years, but my friends and I, all of us who were kind of like implants to San Diego, we would have dinners together. And so we would have like Friendsgiving or like, one Christmas, literally everyone came to my place in their pajamas in the morning and we had Christmas together.
Awesome.
So, there are creative things you can do, but remember it's perspective too. And I just say that to say, if you are spending, not going to gatherings, regardless of what the reasoning may be, if you are feeling kind of down or sad about it, I mean, of course that's okay, but just remember that we don't have to fall into the expectation of what people think these days have to be or what they have to look like. You know what I mean? So, do you.
It is the perfect time to elicit that emotion, right? Of what is supposed to be happening. Like you're supposed to be with friends and you're supposed to be with family, and that it elicits more of like the feeling bad if you're not.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you brought that up, that it's okay if you're not. It's okay to do something different. And just because it's a time where like everything is marketed to, this is what you're supposed to be doing, like buy a lot of presents and give them all out. Well, maybe you can't afford presents, and that's perfectly okay.
That reminds me too, and we weren't going to talk about this. I mean, it wasn't, but it just reminds me too, because I know next month, like when we have like Hanukkah and Christmas and some people celebrate Kwanzaa, a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves about gift giving and buying gifts and like going into panic if they don't have the money for it and all of these things. That's another thing too, like to kind of like set you up to not get too stressed out about that. a lot of people that I know, instead of doing that, I mean, like, yeah, some people do like just pick one friend's name out of the hat and you only have to buy one present. But some people do things like it's just a time to get together to have dinner. And that's it. The gift of company, or, you know what I mean? Or like have a party where everybody watches like Christmas movies or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be. I think in a lot of ways, even culturally, we are breaking a lot of traditional norms and people are starting to do things in their way. Yeah. So it's like, if you want to do something different in how you want to celebrate or spend your time, like maybe introduce a new tradition amongst your friends and family. Why not?
Yeah. And support it. You know, I think sometimes we get a little bit nervous to try something that's different or out of what the normal expectation is. And if it's not well received, then we might take that pretty hard too. But you know what, like, make the decision and just support yourself fully in that.
Yeah. So I think, you know, just to generalize, and so we can wrap it all up and tie it all up. I mean, one of the things you can do to rebalance, no matter how you spent your time, whether it was with others, solo, whatever you did, it's always good to just even daily practice, consider your balance and rebalancing, checking in with how you feel, checking in with what comes up for you emotionally. We've talked to you about before, like journaling, meditation. Tiffany even told you take a walk, which is often great to clear the mind. So there are a lot of things to do, but I would say most importantly, after these types of events, regardless of what you did, do check in with yourself after. Checking in with yourself is so powerful, period. I mean, just any given day, but especially after things like this, where there are, you know, the potential of extreme emotion, extreme feeling, extreme connection, whatever it may be, really check and see if it's necessary for you to rebalance in any way.
You know, one thing we didn't mention that we didn't touch upon was the body aspect of it. Rebalancing your body after meals, alcohol, all the things that come with the holidays. We tend to overindulge, and that's okay. But part of sometimes why emotionally or mentally we feel kind of shitty, it's because physically we're feeling shitty too. And we're putting all these things in our body. And again, it's okay. Like, do you. But know that there's some rebalancing that going to need to come with that too. Like, drink water, drink lots of water, you know, move, get some exercise in, like support your physical body and being able to rebalance and rejuvenate itself as well.
Again, I was going to say that's a good time to do the walk that you talked about. You know, a lot of us, especially after we had that moment of indulging, tend to want to go to sleep. We're tired. We just want to lay it down. Honey, that is the best time to take a walk to help yourself digest and process everything that you just stuffed your face with. So yeah, I mean, even those little things, or even like pacing yourself, not having to like, you know, like you're not racing to eat the food, but like enjoy the conversation, eat slow, kind of space it out. A lot of things you can do to not feel physically drained after the fact.
Yeah. And if you do, that's okay. Just know, like, you need to check in with yourself and be honest about it. Like, okay, I did that damage. Like, let me eat a salad today. And not just a salad, but like just get something healthy into your body and do something active to help move the stuff around. I mean, we're talking about mind body energy. Just a walk is going to help. Like, one, obviously your physical body. Two, your emotional and mental body, by literally getting outside and getting the vibrations of nature is going to help reattune you.
Yeah. I like that you said the water too, because we tend to be very dehydrated after these types of events, and not just because of drinking. Like, even if you don't drink, there's still the potential of being extremely dehydrated. One, because of talking, you dehydrate yourself from yip-yapping. But also, I mean, you could be energetically drained after an exchange. Even if you sat in the corner of a room with a lot going on, you, again, have plenty reason to show up the next day and allow yourself time to rebalance. Rebalance. That's your message. Whatever you're doing, pause and rebalance. Yeah. So we hope that this was helpful. As always, we really love sharing and, you know, just exploring almost everything under the sun with you all. But we love your suggestions. So if anything's coming up, if there's something you would like us to discuss, please share it with us. You can go to mbeproject.com and contact us that way. Or you can go to MBE Project on Facebook and write on our wall and let us know. And you could also follow the podcast, subscribe, leave us a review. We love and appreciate all of those things. That puts us in deep gratitude.
Yeah, good reviews, right? Leave the good reviews.
Leave the good ones, yeah.
If you don't like something, email us. We'll fix it. We promise to fix it.
Well, as you say your wrap-up part, I'm going to just check and see if we have any new ones. What do you need to say to everybody?
I think just, one, be gentle with yourself. These times when we're putting so much effort into putting ourselves out there and being present for all the things that are inevitably going to happen, you know, like work parties, family parties, friend parties. There's going to be a lot of activity. There's going to be a lot of like maintaining your own life amongst all of these other things that we're pulled towards around this time of the year. So just be gentle with yourself. Know that you're doing more than normal and be mindful of it and supporting yourself of that as well.
Honey, isn't that it? I mean, the mindfulness of it all. And it's beautiful how you do just deepen your relationship with yourself in all of this. So hopefully that starts to register too, like you become aware of the relationship with you that you're building and nurturing and all of this self-acknowledgement. So we did have some more actual ratings, like people have rated the show. So thank you so much for that. Again, if you want to leave us a review, we will read it on the show because we get excited about that too. And we hope that you are recovering well, rebalancing, and even share with us on our Facebook page, how was your time? How did you spend it? Did anything come up for you? You have any questions?
Yeah.
To help.
And what worked and what didn't work. Maybe you did try to rebalance and it didn't work. Let us know.
Let us know. Okay, Tiffy, is that it for now?
That's it for now.
Goodbye, everyone.